listening to the Marketing Personalities Podcast, a podcast for growth-minded entrepreneurs that serves up valuable insight and interviews about aligning your marketing strategy with your personality type. Because here's the deal. You shouldn't have to feel fake and salesy in order to grow your business. And you no longer have to. Your marketing strategy can feel good to implement and it can work. You can attract the right clients and customers to your business and grow your profits, all while staying true to who you naturally are. So in the name of honest business growth, bring your unique talents, perspectives, and personality to the table. And join us on this week's podcast episode to discover marketing that feels good for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Personalities Podcast. I'm Brit Kolo, the founder of marketingpersonalities.com and your host. And I'm here today with my good friend, Lanie Lamarre, who is the growth system strategist at lanieLamarre.com. And she also happens to be an INTJ Marketing Personality Type. Lanie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love having chats with you anytime, but on air is even better.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. I always look forward to talking with you. I never know what's truly going to come up because you're so witty. And I'm totally getting ahead of myself. But y'all, like INTJs tend to be kind of like witty and they've got these one-liners that kind of come out of like nowhere and they just hit you. And that is definitely Lanie Lamarre. I know I'm setting the bar high here, but here we are. Like, I know you're going to live up to this because you always get me. You always get me with your one-liners. So anyway, hey, we are not here to talk about one-liners. Lanie and I are actually here today to discuss how she has come to embrace her INTJ-ness and how she's applying it to her marketing strategy, her business strategy, and how it's, the realization of her marketing personality type has shifted and been applied to lots of parts of her business. So we're going to dig into all of that. But first of all, you've got to get to know this cool chick named Lanie. So Lanie, first of all, can you tell us about your entrepreneurial life right now? What do you have your hands in?
I'm the growth system strategist, as you said, at LanieLamarre.com. And my jam is really to treat your done list like it owes you money because it probably does. There's a lot of different tools and things that you can do that are helpful to getting you better results out of the work that you've already done instead of continuously just trying to do more. Instead of more, maybe just focus on doing better.
I love it. And so you are working, tell us how you work with people and how you strategize around growing what's already there. Because I mean, when you look at, the growth system strategist, somebody might see that and think, okay, if we're growing, then we're doing something new, we're launching, we're promoting, we're out there, we're just, all that high energy stuff. And you just kind of flip that on its head right away, as an INTJ usually does, and says, oh, no. Actually, we're going to take a look at everything you've done and optimize it and make it grow for you, being that it's already there.
It's because we're doing the same stuff over and over again, typically, right? So you just mentioned launching, for instance. That's a great example. Things that you would do around launching, you have your project management. And once you've launched once, launching the second time should really just be a carbon copy of what you've already done. So let's look at what you've done, what worked, what didn't work. So then that brings in the metrics and the analytics part of it. So data is going to be another big factor. So project management and data are going to be two major focal points when you are trying to grow. Not necessarily about taking on more things to do when you can actually look at your results, look at your numbers, seeing how you're performing, how your sales funnels are performing, how those emails were performing, and actually improve on what you already have that's working for you and kind of ditch what's not working for you.
Y'all, do you hear the thinking, the strategist, the innovator, I just hear it all in you. And I've come to know you well, and I see that consistency from you. But just from how you're explaining the work that you do, I can see not only this is what you get fired up about, but you're really really freaking good at it. So take us into how you actually do this. Do you work one on one with clients? What kind of clients are you working with? What kind of products you got out there? Like, bring us, for the person who has never been to lanielamar.com, which I have several times because I buy everything you ever create. But if they haven't been there, how do you help us with this? How do you help us strategize around growing stuff that is kind of already into play, but just needs to be optimized, made more efficient, and made more scalable?
Well, I have a couple courses that people can buy. The first one is Airtable Like a Boss. And that's sort of my go to for project management. Not necessarily because I think Airtable is the best way to manage your projects, but it's the best way for me to show people how to plan projects, how to plan their workload in a way where they have these big picture goals, these big visions that they have to account for, especially people who are solopreneurs. Sometimes you get lost in the to-do lists and the tasks, and you end up creating this never-ending checklist of things that you need to do that quite easily gets sort of carried away from you and from those big picture goals because you start adding stuff that has nothing to do with what you set out to accomplish in the first place. So I really do work on mostly mindset stuff, on thinking of your projects in a way where you're accounting for the income targets, the revenue goals, all the things that you want to hit, the things that you say are important, so that you never ever lose sight of those while you're getting that to-do list done, which I think is something that a lot of people who work on their own, you can't help but get caught up in it because you are the only person who is responsible for your success. You're the person seeing all of the workload through, and that's really overwhelming. And it's hard to keep track of everything. So I really try to get people to see how it all connects at all times so that they can be accountable to themselves as if they were being accountable to a boss.
Yeah, and that's all done within Airtable, which listeners, if you're not familiar with Airtable, it's not a tool that's for everybody. I specifically kind of point the analyst tribe over toward Airtable because I think that they're the least likely to get into Airtable and just back away like quickly and be like, "Oh my gosh, this is too much." So analysts, I think, get in there and they're like, "Okay, kind of looks like a spreadsheet. I think I can figure this out." And then I think that everybody else gets just a little itchy, a little scared of it.
For sure.
I'm not part of the analyst tribe, but because I got your course on how to use and get started with Airtable, I use it every single day in my business, and not just to, track my tasks, because you guys know I love Asana for task tracking. But what Airtable does, because you've taught me to use it this way, is it allows me to take those big picture goals and those big creative ideas and all of that, all of my vision and all of my why and the mission I'm on, all those big picture things, and then connect it back to the tasks that I'm actually doing. And I think, we've talked about this before and you were alluding to it earlier. I mean, that's the work of a CEO rather than just someone who is a task rabbit and just like getting stuff done. Well, you could be getting stuff done the rest of your life, but you'd never actually get the thing you want done if you're not careful about it. So that perspective is so cool. I love that.
People feel overwhelmed. I like to allude to the whole feeling of like crying in the Target parking lot or crying in the shower out of just complete overwhelm of not knowing
Oh,
what the hey to do about things because it's a real feeling. And that feeling comes from being overloaded with stuff to do. And if you're not always feeling like that's connected to what you think is important, to what you prioritize, to what you're working so hard to achieve, no wonder you feel kind of icky about the work that you're doing because you're not able to see the whole picture as a whole. So when you're able to do that, it makes it so much easier. I was just speaking with somebody who they were looking at my course and they weren't really sure if they wanted to get it. And they said, "Oh, I created an account and I logged in and it looks like a spreadsheet. And I'm not a spreadsheet person." And I'm like, I totally get that. But it's more than just a spreadsheet because you can view your information in whatever way you want to see fit. And I said, go ahead on my website I have a free base and tutorial where I show you how to create content that is always, always aligned with either getting you paid or growing your list, because that's why you're creating content. It's not because you have a great idea, something that you really have to publish because it's something that you have to share with the world. It really does have to reflect your messaging and the things that you're good at and what your brand represents, right? So when you're creating content in a way that connects with what you're there for, what you provide to people, it helps grow your brand so much easier than just creating content that might be brilliant and genius, but maybe it's brilliant and genius for someone else.
Mm.
So this person downloaded the base and the tutorial and is like, oh my gosh, I thought it would be scary. And it wasn't. And that's the whole point of it, right? To be able to start with looking at the spreadsheet and give me 10 minutes and I will take the scare out of you and help you see how you can change the way that you're thinking about all the things that you're creating, whether that's content, whether that's your next launch, whether that's your quarterly goals.
That's so good. And I have to assume you're talking about the content calendar base. Is that the one that you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I use. So if you've ever, you're a listener of this podcast, right? If you're listening right now, and if you've been following for any amount of time, really, I mean, the content that I create and how I decide what goes live when and what I'm talking about and why I'm talking about it and all of that stuff, it comes out of that Airtable base that Lainey set me up with through her course, Airtable Like a Boss. This is like straight up a commercial for Airtable Like a Boss, but I am so here for it because you know how much I love your courses. You guys, I'm not even a course buyer. Like, I don't even like buying courses, but I bought both of yours. Like, I'm just such a fan.
But to be fair, outside of the course, that base is free. You can get that base and the
Yeah,
tutorial totally for free on, I think it's one of the first things that you see on the homepage. So
that's awesome.
you don't have to buy the course. You can have all of your brilliant ways of delivering content because you are always so on brand, so on point with your messaging. And so now I feel very flattered that it was my base that helps you do that on a regular basis. But yeah, that's a totally free thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you guys, as we're kind of just getting to know Lainey and what she does and trying to, wrap our minds around, okay, so this is what she does in her business. And then we're going to pull it back, to her marketing personality type and how she's using that. Everything that we talk about is linked in the show notes. So everything's there. If you hear us talk about one of her things, her website, one of her products, it's all in the show notes. So you can go there to check that out. But as we kind of bring this back to that original, you're a growth strategist and you're helping us, those of us who own businesses, make intentional decisions about how we're investing our time and our energy so we can grow, not because we're hustling our butts off, but because we've been strategic and smart about where we've invested our time and energy. That's where true growth and I would argue true sustainability comes from. And that's always been from the moment I found your brand, that's always been the core piece of it. It's like, okay, yeah, you can hustle, 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 but at some point you are not going to want to do that anymore. Can we figure out now, before if you're crying in the Target parking lot, girl, I've been there. I hear you. I understand. If you're there, you definitely need Lainey. And if you're not quite there, but you're kind of like a little edgy today and you're feeling a little weepy, yeah, let's get that handled before it becomes a full blown thing, right? So I like the way that you approach this, and it's different, I think, from how a lot of other people approach it. And that kind of brings me to your personality type because you are an INTJ. So let me give the listeners a reminder of what this kind of looks like. So INTJs tend to be super smart. You guys, any amount of time with Lainey, like you're going to realize how big her brain really is. Like she's super super smart and innovative and tends to question things that a lot of us might actually just take for granted. But Lainey's going to come in there and be like, you sure you want to do it that way? You sure? You sure? I think there might be a better way. And that is one thing that I see in your work, Lainey, is that you are committed to finding the best way to do something. Better is good, best is best, right? And you're constantly trying to find the best way to do something, always with that intentionality factor and with the big picture in mind. And I think that if an INTJ is listening to this right now, they're going to be like, yo, yeah, that's what I believe in too. Yeah, it's in you. So I'm curious, this innovator, this person who looks at things differently and questions and maybe rebels a little bit in order to find the best way to do something. Is this something that has always been a part of you? Does that feel like it comes natural? Do you see that within yourself?
I remember when, because we worked together for a few months last year. And I remember when you first, you had asked me something about being my rebellious nature. And I'm like, I'm not rebellious. I'm a rule follower,
Oh my gosh, that's right.
which I'm now seeing in retrospect as not so much rebellious, but always needing to have sort of, I don't want to say the upper hand, but understanding how all the things work and not being told how they work,
Yes.
but figuring it out for yourself and making sure that you have validated it for yourself. So that's something that I learned from working from you, where I have to have it validated. It's not enough for me to know that something works. It's not enough for me to hear what the rule is. I really need to know why it's done this way.
The way that you just expressed that, I think was so much more accurate. I mean, I think some INTJs self identify as rebellious, but I've also gotten that response too from people like, I think I'm kind of a rule follower actually. But it's only after that in depth look at like, wait, but why are we doing this? Let me just check. Let's make sure all this checks out. Okay, then I'll follow the rule.
Absolutely.
Right. Whereas like other personality types are going to just kind of follow blindly just because that's how we are. Like, no big deal. So interesting. Okay. So take us into your experience knowing your marketing personality type. You mentioned earlier, we worked together back when I was doing long term coaching with clients. Lanie and I worked together for a few months there last year. And it's funny to think back now where we started in that conversation and where we got to in just a couple months. And now we're, almost a year out from that experience. It's funny to think back on those types of conversations and the awareness that came out of them. So take us back and tell us, what's your experience been like finding out about your marketing personality type and then practicing applying it? What's that been like?
That's totally the truth of it, has been figuring out my personality, my marketing personality, because I didn't really know about it very much until I started working with you. I kind of like, I knew I was an INTJ, and even that I was a little bit defiant on because I was kind of in the middle for a bunch of stuff. Like I was something like 48 to 52 for introvert versus extrovert, for instance. So I'm like, oh, what does it mean when you're in the middle? All that kind of stuff. But when I started working with you, actually, I don't even think I ever told you this. The reason I reached out to work with you was because I saw in an Instagram story that you had a workflow that you had been working on for somebody else that you had just sort of showcased in your story. And that's like the keys to my heart, right? A workflow with all
Mm.
the little arrows and everything's pointing in a beautiful direction. I'm like, oh, yes, I want something like that. I need someone who's going to help me figure out, because I was at that point where I needed to figure out, how am I going to market myself? And I didn't really want to invest in a coach that I wasn't sure was going to be the right fit for me. I didn't know what the right fit for me was.
Mhm.
So working with you really helped me figure out what direction someone like me needs to take. And that workflow was just the catalyst of knowing that you would get me.
Speaking that love language, raise your hand if you love the workflow, the flow chart, the map, like name it whatever you want. Those arrows all going in one direction are a thing of beauty, I think, for some of us. Other people are like, yeah, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
But for us, yeah, we love that, don't
You had my
we?
heart. You totally had my heart.
So as you started to become aware of what your strategy could look like based on who you were, what happened then? Like, were you all into it? Did you put it into play right away? Like, what did that look like?
Well, just like we talked about with the rebelliousness and all that stuff, yeah, I guess the rebellious defined the rule personality type really shone through when we were working together, because there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk to you about trying. For instance, I remember I was like, maybe I should be, because I didn't even have my product suite set up yet. I had Airtable Like a Boss, which was like my my kind of go-to product at that point. I wasn't sure what direction I wanted to take with my product suite. I knew I wanted some data. It was a strength of mine, but I wasn't even sure how that would play out. And working with you enabled me to be able to build out something that was sustainable for me to sell on a regular basis, that wouldn't demand energy that I didn't necessarily have. Because, like I was alluding to earlier, we talked about doing all kinds of different things that may or may not work for me, and I would bring ideas to the table to you. So for instance, I said maybe I should have a mastermind, like something where we every 2 weeks we would sit down for an hour with the community, and we would go through data stuff together. And you said, in your gentle loving way, but not telling me what to do, because I'm not going to listen, but kind of hinting towards, are you sure that you are the kind of person who wants to show up twice a month with that obligation part of it? And I'm like, no, I hate obligations. Don't give me them. I don't want a mastermind. So it was one of those ways of not telling me what I should be doing. But when I would give you an idea of something I wanted to do, you would always ask me the right questions to make me question whether that was something I actually not wanted. Because of course, everybody wants the consistent passive income, blah, blah, blah. But is it something you can sustain? And the answer was no for me. Absolutely not. I cannot sustain a mastermind.
Okay, that's interesting. So it sounds like something I picked up in there was somewhere along the way, you figured out that the one to many model, where you were able to create one thing and then get into the hands of lots of people, felt like a good shift for you. And then also in an automated way. So you weren't, like you said, to use your word, obligated to show up live. Like, was this something that you had been kind of chewing on for a while? Did you find it within us working together and then put it into play? Take me into that business model conversation, because I've seen this change over time for you. Where have you landed on that?
I like that you say, like, how did this work looking within your business model? Because that's the thing. When you're looking at what everyone else is doing and what's working for everybody else, you try to internalize what's happening on the outside of your business to see if that's going to work on the inside of your business. And that's fine. That's good to do. But it's better to ask the questions before implementing the things and testing all the things. Because when you know what vibes with you, when you actually get honest with what you can actually sustain and work with, then you're able to sort of set the wheels in motion to grow, as opposed to, oh, I should try a mastermind. I should try this. I should try that. Maybe it's not about trying, but asking yourself the questions of what is honest to the integrity that I can regularly show up for, and that is building a business that I want, as opposed to what I'm hearing everybody else doing. And it's hard to block out that noise in order to focus on those things. And it's not very glamorous too, because what I figured out is SEO works great for me to be able to do ads that works into a funnel where I can nurture people, the nurturing is happening in a funnel sequence, in a sales sequence, in a client journey, if you will, where I don't necessarily have to show up, but I can always provide the materials where people see how I'm showing up for them, which is not necessarily live. I'm not doing live stuff. I will have a lot of recordings and those types of things. And I'm very generous with those things, but I'm not the person who's going to be doing regular Facebook Lives, for instance. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So why try to fit into that hole, or that square peg, if you will, if you're the circle that is, it's not that I'm uncomfortable with doing it. I just resent doing it. There's a lot of things too where
Mhm.
people think that if you're an introvert, it means you're shy. No, I'm not shy. I'm fine in front of the camera. I don't have a problem doing it. I just resent having to show up, that obligation of showing up. It's like a personal, the rebellion part, I guess. But it's not something that I enjoy doing because of the obligation part of it. It's such a weird thing, right? But it's not that I don't want to show up. It's not that I'm not generous. It's a funny quirk that I've not only accepted, but found a way to leverage, essentially,
Yes.
because you don't have to show up live in order to deliver.
Oh my gosh. Just rewind that and listen to it a couple more times. That was, yep, all of that, all of that. And I think this is especially relatable to INTJs. I think a lot of introverts overall are probably going to feel very related to that. And I think all of us have that thing that, it's really easy to kind of maybe like feel a little bad about, like, maybe it's a should, or maybe it's just kind of like, well, I just don't want to. Like, I know I could serve in that way, but like, I just, you know what? You can accept it. I love how you brought that all around and said, why this is here, I don't know. But what I've been able to get to is acceptance of that, and to build a strategy that does not include that thing that makes me resentful, because resentment is not a great energy to bring to the table. And if we can just not bring that to the table, we're better than if we do. So yeah, you got to feel good.
Resentment is a bad look.
Yeah. Hashtag resentment is a bad look. I love that. We might have to make that a quotable.
It's so true. And here's the thing too, with when you're thinking about the ways that you're supposed to show up,
Hmm.
generally speaking, I found that you can always find a work around that. So if you don't like showing up on Instagram stories, and that's kind of my thing. Again, it's not because I'm camera shy. It's because I don't like the obligation of having to think of, oh my gosh, I should do a story. I'm not the person who's like filming everything and recording things as they're happening. I'm the person who's sitting back after it's been done, and I'm just like, oh shoot, I should have recorded that and then put it on Instagram stories. I'm never thinking in the moment of what I'm going to post to social media. So what I've learned to do is I batch, and I learned this by actually collaborating with somebody else, where I took over their Instagram stories for a day. And I essentially just recorded all my videos for the day and just randomly dripped them out, which was brilliant because I use that on my own Instagram stories now. I'll do it once a week where I sit down, record all my stuff for the week that's going to be dripped throughout the week. I don't feel the obligation of constantly having to show up on camera. And yet I still am, because I put, the hour and a half aside on Sunday afternoon or Monday morning and just batch everything for the rest of the week. So there are always workarounds to the things that you think you should do that you can do in your own integrity, that fits your own personality.
Yeah. I also want to underscore the fact that I like you doing it that way, because at the beginning of that you said, "Hey, like I have no problem with video. I like video." Which, I mean, some INTJs would be like, "Oh, no, I don't like video." But now you're telling me that because I should be on Instagram stories. No, no, no. We're staying away from that. We got to remember, like, if any part of it doesn't feel good, then you're probably not going to bring the right energy to it. So in Lanie's case, it wasn't that video was the problem. It was the having to be, in the moment, like sharing something as she was, no, she's too strategic for that, right? Like, so she likes it scheduled out. And so that's the workaround for her. Some other people might be like, yo, video's off the table. I don't want to do video. And so then your stuff is going to look a little different. But lots of permission happening here, which I can definitely get down with.
And that's the truth of it, where you really need to know why you feel a certain way about something. If you can validate why you feel hesitant to do Instagram stories, then if you know it's because you don't like video, then that's cool. If it's because of the obligation part, like me, well, there are workarounds. Like, it's about being able to know yourself, know what your boundaries are, and figure out how you can work within them or not. But once you're, I guess, absolved, maybe is the word, of feeling guilty about Instagram. So you're like, I don't like video and I'm not doing Instagram stories. The end. You don't have to have any more feelings about it. You don't have to listen to conversations about it, because you validated to yourself, and that's the end of that conversation. You can move on to whatever else is actually fitting into how you work well.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit, because you shared with me earlier that once you were able to tap into your personality type, we got to work with it as it related to your marketing strategy. And when we got that streamlined flow chart strategy figured out, we got it rocking and rolling. And then once we got done working together, you shared with me that your focus on being able to work with other people, hiring other coaches, hiring other people to work with, became a bit easier because you had a focus. Can you take us into how that kind of had a ripple effect? Once you know your marketing personality type, not only does your marketing strategy become clearer, but your focus elsewhere. might become clearer too.
Totally. Working with you was one of the best decisions I've made in my business because of where I was at the time that I hired you. When we started working together, like I said, I had the Airtable Like a Boss course. I was thinking of developing my data course, Boss Mode Metrics. I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to format that because I guess I just didn't know myself in a marketing aspect well enough. So once I started working with you, I knew that I was on the right track to continue down the course direction. So going back to before I started working with you, I just didn't really know the most efficient way to market myself. I knew I needed help, but I wasn't really sure what kind of coach I should be hiring. I knew I needed some one on one help, but again, I wasn't really certain on the direction that I needed to take. And I was ready to make a big investment. I just didn't want to make the wrong one when you're throwing, a lot of money at a problem. You want to make sure it's the right problem that you're solving, or at least that's how I work because I'm an INTJ. So when I worked with you, I really got to see that, okay, so backing it up, I format my products in a way that's going to work with the kind of energy that I'm able to put out on a regular basis, not just during launch period, not just with a client or something. It has to be something that I can sustain because that's what we're building here, sustainable businesses. And then once I was clear on how my product suite should look like, then we started talking about how am I going to be able to get more eyes on my brand, on my offers. So that really helped me hire a higher level coach in marketing that would be really specific to the types of marketing tactics that I not only would feel comfortable with, but would thrive from.
Hmm. Perfect. I love that. I love that. Okay. So now well, you know what? I'm going to make a little side note because I know somebody's listening to this and they're like, Lanie just said that her best investment was working with you. And where's your coaching page on your website? Somebody's wondering that. They're probably driving down the road right now, swerving all around, trying to find my coaching page on my website. I don't have a coaching page anymore. I don't do the coaching that I used to do that Lanie's talking about. Sorry for your luck, I guess. I don't know. That's just not where my energy is going. But you know where my energy has gone is in those marketing personality type full reports. I'm telling you, there's so much in there. If you just download it and work through it, there's so much in there. All this clarity that Lanie and I were able to work through one on one, so much of it is in that download. So if you're that person swerving around the road right now or falling off their treadmill, it's okay. I got you. I'm still here. There's no coaching page, but you can go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to get your full report. All right. So got that out of the way.
And when we started working together, you did not have that. It was much smaller back then. It was maybe like
Yeah.
20, maybe 30 pages or something like that. And I purchased that, and that was sort of my gateway to knowing that I needed more. But
Mhm.
then when you upgraded them, I saw like, oh my gosh, this is the more. Like everything is in there. And everything that we worked on, it may not have the one-on-one component, but it certainly has all the questions you need to be asking yourself and the directions and the things that will start to make you think about how your personality works with how you should be promoting yourself.
The pieces are in there. The pieces are definitely in there. And then you and I just got to, with our big brains that are both separately big and different, we just were able to bring in so many perspectives. I mean, when I get to work with someone who has an equal love for flowcharts and spreadsheets and databases, like come on now. Like we are gonna make some magic. And we totally did. But yeah, thanks for saying that. There's some goodness in there. So Lanie, take us into, now that you have built out two products that I have that I super love, and you've built out this automated, really great system to sell your stuff. Take us into the vision for your brand in this year, 2020. Where are we headed with this?
We are headed into better, not more.
Ooh, I like it.
I started in late 2019 on my 2020 vision, I guess. I'm not really working with the timelines. I'm working with how I'm feeling and where my energy's at, which is kind of maybe a funny thing for a thinker to say or an analyst to say. But at some point, you really do have to tap into how you feel about your business and how it's making you feel. And I was getting to a point where I was very overwhelmed with my workload, the types of work I was taking on, the types of all the brilliant ideas that I wanted to work out. But then I pared it down into what is really going to move me ahead and move my brand ahead. And really, it's the focus on project management for creative entrepreneurs who may be working alone and who really need that accountability of their big vision goals and their to-do lists, and then data, because data is one of those things that creative entrepreneurs have. I hear this all the time where they'll say, I'm not a numbers person.
Mm.
And yet they'll tell me how many Instagram followers they have. They know how many people they have on their list, like Snap. They'll be able to give me these big income target goals that they have. And these are all numbers. So it's not that you don't like numbers or that you're not a numbers person. It's just that they haven't been communicated to you in a way that you can gravitate to, that you can really connect with. So I'm very, very intentional about showing numbers and literally showing them in a way that you can visualize how you're performing. So instead of giving you Google Analytics, for instance, to look into to figure out what your sales funnel or your client journey looks like, I literally put it in a funnel so that you can actually see, so how many people are hitting my sales page and what's the conversion rate for that? And it's shaped like a funnel so that you can actually see, oh, and then the checkout page and then the thank you for purchase page, so that you can really visually identify the gaps of where it's happening, as opposed to looking at numbers. Why don't we just look at what the visual performance would look like in a graphic way that creative people can wrap their brains around? Because like I said, it's not that you don't like numbers and that you're not a numbers person. It's just that your brain thinks in a different way. So I like to communicate data in a way that is friendly to creative types.
I love that. Okay. So you are focusing on not creating new stuff, but it sounds like doubling down on what you've already created, both in Airtable Like a Boss and then your other course that we haven't really talked a whole lot about, but I also equally love, Boss Mode Metrics. Is that what you're kind of leaning toward right now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, right now at the time of this recording, I have my assistant working through Boss Mode Metrics. I went through it, didn't implement it, but I got through it to understand. And as I was learning, like the more and more, and listen, I could watch your course modules all day. They're just so stinking funny. Like you're talking about the most boring stuff, but they're so funny. So I watched through it without implementing. And then I tossed it over to my assistant and I said, yo, we got to implement this. Like, let's go. And so she's working on that right now. So very cool. I like the idea of better and not more. And it's really, it's funny, Lainey, you weren't part of this conversation, but the interview that's going to go live next week, listeners, on February 6th, I'm going to be interviewing another INTJ. And I cannot wait for you to hear this one, because you're going to hear a lot of the same themes within that interview said in a little different way. And I think for anyone who is an INTJ or close to it, so I'm talking like INTPs, ISTJs, that one letter difference, you're going to hear it not once in this interview with Lainey, you're going to hear it again in a little different way. Oh my gosh, you are going to have all the permission you need to just be yourself and just do it this year. So I'm pumped to hear that, and I want more people to get your stuff, Lainey, because it's great. I love it. So where can listeners find you online and support this vision?
You can find me over on lanielamar.com is where I have a bunch of free stuff. So that funnel that I talked about earlier, you can get a copy of that workshop, and you can get a copy of the content calendar that you were raving about. But I wanted to bring it back to something that you were just saying about different personality types, having them describe themselves and how they're speaking. I think that your podcast is important for everyone to listen to, regardless of what their personality type is, because when you're improving the way that you're selling things, part of that is really understanding who you're selling to. And I've grown to understand the people that I help. When it comes to data, a lot of the people that I'm helping are not thinking types. These are feeling types who are convinced that they don't understand numbers because it's not their vibe, which is not true at all. but it's a matter of understanding how those people speak and express themselves and what their frustrations are in a way that you can connect and offer them videos where that'll make them laugh, as opposed to showing them all the technical stuff that maybe a more thinking type would appreciate. So I wanted to put some emphasis on not necessarily paying attention to marketing personalities as what you're doing, but also looking at the people who are around you and how knowing how they interact really helps you get better at what you're doing.
Yes, 100%. Without saying it directly, I always hope in my heart of hearts that people don't just listen to episodes that are about them, which I mean, I look at my stats every week and I don't think people are doing that very often because it's pretty consistent across the board. But a big part of this podcast is about shining a light on every person and every personality type, not just the one that you feel like you self identify as or relate to most, but it creates, by listening to all of them, it creates a unique opportunity to feel compassion for people that we wouldn't regularly understand. And then if that can also, on top of that, I mean, like that's great, period. But but if we can also apply that to how we interact with our clients and our customers and our mastermind buddies and our business friends and the random people we see on Instagram, like, hey, that's bonus, right? So very cool. Thanks for underlining that for me. I really appreciate it. So everybody, you heard her. Lanie is super rad. You can go find her at lanielamar.com. And I've linked to literally everything we've talked about today in the show notes, right in your podcast app. You can just scroll down, click anything that looks cool, and go get your Airtable, your data, as Lanie said, data. She says data. I say data. Always makes me giggle. You can get your data all figured out and get some growth going. Not because you're doing more, but because you're doing better. All right. Like I said earlier, I'm going to catch you back here next week with another interview with an INTJ, hitting on some stuff that once you've listened to this episode, you hear this next one that's coming up next week, and your mind's just going to be blown with how these conversations kind of meld together. Didn't plan it, but it happened. So I'll catch you back here next week. See ya. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Now it's time to connect your marketing strategy to your personality type. Go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to download your marketing personality type full report. Use the code MPP at checkout to get $10 off. And that's a super special code for podcast listeners as a way to say thank you for being here. In your full report, you'll learn about your personality type, how it relates to the work you do, what your best marketing strategy includes so you can start implementing it right away, what your worst marketing strategy includes so you can avoid it, and so much more. Go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to get your full report and use the code MPP at checkout to receive $10 off your purchase. And one more thing before you skip on to the next podcast. Would you please share this episode with your entrepreneur friends who also need to feel good about their marketing strategies? Take a quick screenshot of your podcast app right now and share it out via text, Facebook, or my favorite, Instagram. Remember to tag me at Marketing Personalities in the photo so I can be sure to send you a huge high five and thank you for sharing the love. This podcast is edited and produced by the Podcast Engineers. They're pretty great, and you can find them at podcastengineers.com. That's all for now. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll catch you back here next week on the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Love ya. Bye.